Val Marmillion, Managing Director of America's Wetland Foundation, spoke to the Press Club of Baton Rouge.
When we first began the campaign a decade ago, the America's Wetland Campaign to Save Coastal Louisiana, it was a result of the state of Louisiana and our chairman, King Milling, having a commission that said the nation and the world really doesn't know what's going on in South Louisiana and the impact that it's going to have in the next decade or two on the rest of not only the state, its region, but also the nation and the world. And so when we began this campaign, Baton Rouge really wasn't on the map. And we had a long discussion where we sat in a room, and some of my colleagues, Karen Gautreaux and Sidney Coffey here today, talked about launching a part of our campaign called A Place Called America's Wetland. And we had a big debate whether Baton Rouge was part of that. And it's only 10 years later, and although we did put Baton Rouge on the map as part of America's wetland, now it's become painfully obvious that Baton Rouge is right in the middle of America's wetland. In less than 10 years, we have lost an astronomical rate of land. When we first began the foundation, we kicked off an event at Tiger Stadium, and on the boards, we put the stadium filling up with water gradually. And it was the first time we used the metaphor of a football land. At that time, it was every half hour, and it changes as the coast changes. But now it's about every 53 minutes. And that land loss every hour for the past 10 years, and the most recent land loss is recorded on our website, americaswetland.com. And it's a sad commentary to a nation that has forgotten how to prioritize. In the United States, we roll out the money across every congressional district in America, and everybody gets their little piece of the action. And we don't know what's important and what's not. The special interest in Washington line up to make sure that everybody gets a piece of the pie, and what left goes down to the states. And quite frankly, we haven't had a strong voice for Louisiana in Washington and for the region. They don't see us in Washington as a state that understands stewardship and environmental quality, when in fact we have the largest environmental issue in America on our coast, with the largest rate of land loss on the planet in the Mississippi Delta, and we only rival deltas like the Mekong Delta and other undeveloped nation deltas in its land loss. Now, Baton Rouge follows New Orleans and now Laplace. And the next stop along I-10 is Gonzales, and then it's going to be here. And that may seem overdramatic to all of you, particularly folks in the press who seem to think that we over-dramatize issues. But this isn't a matter of 10 years. We're not talking about historically significant ages and eons. We're talking about within the lifetime of the children that you have in this room and grandchildren, we're going to have Baton Rouge as part of the coastal zone. In 2005, Livingston and part of Ascension was added to the coastal zone for the first time ever. And East Baton Rouge Parish is next. Now, what does that mean to be part of the coastal zone in Louisiana? Well, it means some problems with permitting, certainly. If you have to go through the Formula 404 Coastal Zone Management Act regulations, the Corps of Engineers will be involved in your lives when you try to permit. But what it means more than that is that the next Laplace can happen in the outskirts of Baton Rouge. Your low-lying areas can flood in Baton Rouge. And if Gustav and Isaac didn't prove that to you, everyone in Baton Rouge needs to wake up and realize that you're next on the list. Now, we have just finished a series of 11 meetings in 5 states where we were challenged by the federal government to go find out what the answers are. Go down into the lower regions of the coast and bring us back what you think we need to do. And that's what the Beyond Unintended Consequences report represents. Common sense answers from people who've lived in this region and indigenous peoples who are giving back to the federal government what they asked for. And as my mama, before she passed away, said to me, always be careful what you ask for, Val, because you'll always get it. And they've gotten it in 30 answers to their questions in this report. Now let's start with what the basis and one of our real problems is in unintended consequences. It's the concept of unintended consequences itself, that we can wait for a disaster to happen based on what we've done to change our landscape and then be satisfied with the tens of billions of dollars it costs to fix it. This is a huge problem for the taxpayer. It's not smart thinking by these folks who think they know how to run a country to not invest in the coastal zone of Louisiana to prevent $140 billion as an aftermath of Katrina and Rita alone. And we're not adding the storms that are now coming. Unintended consequences from building the levees on the Mississippi River. National Geographic, 1897. The effect of withholding by the levees from the great areas of the Delta the annual contributions of sedimentary matters and the steady, though slow subsidence of these areas is one which should be taken into account in deciding the important question of how to protect the people from the floodwaters of the river. No doubt the great benefit to the present and two or three following generations, accruing from a complete system of absolutely protected levees, excluding the floodwaters entirely from the great area and the lower Delta country, far outweighs the disadvantages to future generations from the subsidence of the Gulf Delta lands, below the level of the sea, their gradual abandonment due to this cause. While it would be generally conceded that the present generation should not be selfish, yet it also safe to say that the development of the Delta country during this 20th century by a fully protective levee system, at whatever the cost to this region and these states and the federal government, is worth it. That's not an unintended consequence. That's an intended consequence by the federal government to levee the Mississippi River and separate and divide the healthy floodwaters and sediments from the lower Mississippi Delta. And look at the price that we are paying. Think about how much this is costing us now. There are 4 documents that are very important. The one I showed you, that we've just released 30 recommendations. This National Geographic article also. And what we're saying is the real problem with the federal government in a report released by the Fish and Wildlife Service by Chairman Dale Hall, who said no matter if we want to restore the coast, there are so many conflicting federal policies that push the timeline to restoring the coast so deep that we will never get to the projects, and we will cost the states an enormous amount of money who have to meet the federal cost share to do these projects. And the 4th document that you should get your hands around is the State's Coastal Restoration and Protection Plan. It is a remarkable document. It's the first time on the planet, not in Louisiana, not in our state, but on the planet, that we've had a comprehensive document to restore the coasts, which is seen in the next 30 years as the most troubling problem with climate change and sea level rise that we have on the planet. And so our state of Louisiana, which is not seen as a state of stewardship, which is not seen as an environmentally forward state, has come out with a report to restore our coast, and we've galvanized our people in the 80 percentiles and 90 percentiles to support this. We polled them. We polled the people of Louisiana who have said in the 80 to 90 percentiles that they believe that sea level rise is a problem. Well, guess what? We went out and did a $4.5 million report with Entergy Corporation, zip code by zip code, before we had these 11 meetings, and it said the same thing. The state's economy, the region's economy, and ultimately the national economy will not be able to support the infrastructural costs that we're going to have in the next 30 years from the loss due to sea level rise in this region. So we're not the dummies that people make us out to be down here. And neither are the people who actually fish and hunt and have grown the land in South Louisiana. They know the rising tide is at their doorstep. They know that we have to take action and not only build engineered results that are hard engineered results like levees and huge walls, but we have to combine that with natural engineering and build back our wetlands. And in 2003, we were talking about $14 billion, and now we're talking about $50 billion. And today it's still a bargain when you talk about New Orleans and Katrina and Rita outcomes costing $140 billion. So what's the problem? Well, the problem is this region hasn't been at the table. And those of you who watched one of the conventions, you know, saying, we always say at our foundation, if you're not at the table, then you're on the menu. And we've been on the menu a long time. We're asked to provide the resources, the energy, the seafood, the transportation resources to this country, and we're constantly eaten at a little by little because the people think, I guess in Congress, that we're a rich state. Well, if you look at the budget talks of this administration, I can't find the wealth in Louisiana from all that we've done to host energy development. We're in a constant storm. We're not needing a name anymore for the storms. Every day, every hour, a little bit of eaten away Louisiana is in our heritage and in our past. And it's starting to add up and cost not only our state, but the nation a lot.
We continue from the Press Club of Baton Rouge with Val Marmillion, Managing Director of America's Wetland Foundation.
Yesterday, in Jefferson, St. Charles, and Orleans Parish, an emergency high water level was announced. This is a harbinger of things to come, that we're announcing high water levels at a high tide in 3 parishes of Louisiana, not far from East Baton Rouge Parish. This is the constant storm. This is what we're facing. We are, in one way, fortunate that we have the perfect issue. We have the perfect issue for America right now. It involves climate, energy, and the coast. We in our foundation combine those 3, and when we started, to some criticism, that how can you put those together? Those are separate things. They're not. They're not separate. Business and industry, and the NGO community, and leaders from communities, and community activists have to be at the table to solve this problem. It's the perfect issue. Look at CNN. It's a cottage industry for them, these storms. They have the red coats. They stand in high-powered winds and blow themselves around for hours on television. People want to advertise for that story. They get more advertising during storms than any time from their big sponsors and advertisers. We are the story in Louisiana. We just have to make sure that everyone knows that we're the story. So our job is building knowledge. It's like a good liberal arts university used to be. We're to do research. We're to progress. We're to take groups, hard work like CPEX, who's in the room today, who went out and did studies and asked people questions and listened to what the locals felt. It's like our 11 forums where we found out what people said, and then we're trying to answer the call from Washington to do something about it. Our job is knowledge. We have to take the state's master plan and people understand each part of it and what they're prioritizing to do, because it impacts the lives of every person in Baton Rouge. This is not a waiting storm. We're not waiting for the next name to drop. And our job is to build knowledge. And that's what this report that we released last week does. And I'll say something else. It's nonpartisan. We're in a toxic political environment in this country where Republicans and Democrats find it great joy to tear each other down. Well, we don't have the luxury of that happening here. And consequently, David Vitter and Mary Landrieu were at this press conference, and our delegation and our administration is working together because they realize that our solutions have got to be across the board and not about politics. It's too important to leave to politics. And so last week we went to the Council on Environmental Quality, we went to the White House Policy Office, and we went to Capitol Hill, and we gave these findings, and we said, this is a constant storm. You cannot walk away from it. You created it, and we have actually in print in National Geographic where you said in 2 generations this was going to be solved. It's not solved, and we need it solved. And we need it solved for the nation. We need it solved because the Intercoastal Canal is disappearing at the fastest rate of any waterway in the country. Ask the landowners on the side of the Intercoastal Canal. The saltwater intrusion's killing their cattle, killing their crops. Most of the goods that go east and west from Houston to Mobile go in the Intercoastal Canal. That feeds the Mississippi River. That feeds the 31 states north of us. That feeds the economy of the nation. The most important economic driver in the nation is at our feet, and it's being lost. Knowledge. We're building knowledge. And when we say unintended consequences, we say it because we have to get beyond that. That's not a good enough excuse anymore for Louisiana, for Texas, Mississippi, Alabama, or Florida. We're a region, and we need to be treated equally to the Chesapeake, the Great Lakes, and Cal-Fed in California. Those organizations, those places have come together and get a lot of money from the federal government. We want to be in line for that and not have to wait for an oil spill to give us a windfall to save our coast. That's embarrassing. It's totally embarrassing for a nation who wants to claim that it is on the top of the ladder. So our final act today here is to let you know that we're going to build knowledge here in Washington and take this report to Vietnam, to the Mekong Delta, because we think we have to do it on the world stage as well. We're going to tell them about Louisiana, and we're going to have the World Delta Dialogues too in Ho Chi Minh City in May of 2013. And we're going to bring our results, because in our minds, we think that this restoration economy that we built is really a great stimulus package for this region. We think that our industries can invest in putting back land and use that land as a carbon sequestration opportunity, a sink where wetlands can take carbon out of the air, greenhouse gases out of the air, and we can build the land and raise money at the same time to do more restoration. The state has been working on this, and I see Jerome Serang here with us. He has a task force on this. He has a task force on nutrient credits, so that the nutrients that go into the river, we can make money off of and help build our coast back and deal with the degradation, the toxic zone that we're having off the coast of Louisiana that's grown to be the size of the state of New Jersey. You couldn't have made this story up if you tried to. It's impossible that you could have made a story up like we're dealing with today. So, cut through the rhetoric, read the results of this report, which have 30 recommendations that we send to Washington, and try to build knowledge along with us. I know we have a group of Episcopal students with us today. We appreciate you coming to learn, because it's your generation that we're talking about. We want Baton Rouge actually to be a sound, safe place. And while you're going to be on the map as a coastal zone community, we hope that you'll take the stewardship seriously and work with us to have a better day for all of Louisiana. Thank you very much.
We continue with Val Marmillion, Managing Director of America's Wetland Foundation, answering questions at the Press Club of Baton Rouge.
Since I have to answer the question, I will say that there are people in the room who would be much better at answering it. But the $50 billion is a good faith estimate in what it would take to employ the Louisiana Coastal Management Protection Plan. We will never restore the entire coast. I think the discussion and the point we raise is restoring the values of the coast so that those things that the coast gives back in terms of community, economy, and environment can best be saved. And that's what the plan seeks to do and prioritizes projects along the way to do it. More now than ever from the state. But the state is under a real problematic situation in having to cost share for core projects. And the state, having a budgetary crisis, is having to find funds as well to cost share for these projects. These projects, when the state commits to doing them, sometimes are held up by federal conflicting policy and regulations that will not allow the projects to go forward. I'll give you a perfect example. We have in the back of our report some examples of projects that have been stopped. Every federal agency operates in a silo, and they are responsible for their mission-specific work. And so when we try to rebuild the wetlands, for example, when we put back land that has been eroded, and now it's open water conditioned, and fish and wildlife now may reside in those conditions. Well, the Fish and Wildlife Department can come in and stop the project and say they object, or they would like for that permit to go back into review by the state to see if the project can be done in a way that doesn't affect the fish that have now occupied or populated the space where land was. Now, that's an oversimplification, I realize, but it is the way it's been happening that our permits get held up. And as you have time added to each of the permits, costs go up astronomically. And then the state is pushed out of its cost share position and has to fund more. Well, the good news is that the age of studying is over. And it is good. And I think people were frustrated that it took so long to get the studies finished. But the state now has an actionable plan. And we like to think, just because we worked hard at that conference to bring international folks along, and a science summit that we hosted, and the next summit that we will host in Vietnam, that the information coming in to a fluid plan will constantly help update and keep the plan alive. The state has been working, I have to say, extremely hard with all communities, businesses, landowners, communities, elected officials, and NGOs, to make sure this plan is bulletproof. It won't be bulletproof, right? Nothing's bulletproof, but at least they're moving into the actionable stage now beyond the planning.
What do you want from the average citizen?
The average citizens need to be alert. The average citizen needs to know that this community has been assessed as being vulnerable to the rising tide. The Entergy study I mentioned said that these communities aren't going to be able to keep up economically with this, but it also said that we're going to have stronger storm events and longer lasting storm events. That was two of the big findings. What was Isaac? It was a longer lasting storm event. And what was and what happened because of Isaac? It threw out a lot of the books from Katrina and Rita and Gustav, and it flooded Laplace because it sat there. And that seeping tide and that degraded coast and that saturated land was filled with water to the point where it accepted from the Pontchartrain, new tidal surges and water into places that it had not really been much before, maybe Betsy. So we have a situation here that is acute, and everyone needs to understand that. And then the average citizen can go to americaswetland.com or go to the state coastal office and find out this information and get more involved and make people understand in industry and in the NGO community and in government. This is the top priority that we have now. And Baton Rouge is no longer north of the problem.